Working with fiberglass is a lot like being a good chef or a cook. Now that may seem like a stretch there, but bear with me. Think about with cooking, you got a lot of ingredients. You mix them in different combinations, you can get all kind of different wonderful results. If you look behind me, we've got fiberglass ingredients, if you will. And in varying combinations, when you work these together, combine them like ingredients in a recipe, and you let them cure or cook for a certain amount of time, you can get amazing things. You can build boats, you can build RV parts, airplanes, arts and crafts. I mean, there's just an amazing amount of things. So that's what this episode is all about, folks. I want to use my knowledge as a second generation boat builder and growing up here in a boat shop and share it with everybody out there, especially the DIYers, the do-it-yourselfers. But even if you got fiberglass experience, hang in there with me through this episode, because I can almost guarantee you there's going to be some useful tips and tricks that you can apply and use maybe you've never thought of before. So first off, let's just do a super quick around the table introduction. If you're new to fiberglass, you need to understand the basics. So I'm going to go back to our cooking illustration. Think, for example, if you're going to make a loaf of bread, basically you need a liquid, you need flour, and you need yeast or an activator. So let's just say our liquid would be our resins. You're going to have polyester, vinyl ester, and epoxy are your three most popular. And we're going to be using all this stuff throughout the video. So again, hang in there with me. We're going to move right through it very rapidly. Then you would have, like say for example, what would be your flour, which would be your actual fiberglass fabrics. We got CSM or chopped strand mat. We've got 1708 biaxial, 1808 biaxial, which that's the same as this one. And then we've got 18-ounce woven, and we've got a finishing cloth. Now, all of those are going to be important in different combinations. It's basically raw fiberglass, just like you got resins, but they have pros and cons, and we're going to discuss that for everybody. We're going to answer a lot of questions today. And then your activator is going to be your MEKP. That is like your yeast for your bread. That is going to make this stuff cure and get hard and activate it so that you've got a durable, workable product. Now, on a side note, there's one other component you're going to see here on the table, and these are what we call core materials. A lot of times with fiberglass, you've got a synthetic core or something like plywood between layers of fiberglass to yield a unique material with unique properties. So before we delve into it too deep, good idea to put a little bit of PPE on. And while I'm doing this, I'd like to introduce you folks to the channel. My name is Joe Buskins. I'm a second generation professional boat builder, 100-ton U.S. Coast Guard licensed captain. And this is our family's boat shop that I grew up in. My father was a boat builder. My brother is a boat builder. We're multi-generational fishermen and boat builders. So I know if you're like me, when I watch a lot of YouTube content, if I'm taking advice from somebody, I want to see their credentials or hear their credentials. What have you done? Where have you been? Why should I listen to you? So that is kind of my background there. And of course, if you want to verify some of this stuff, if you're new to the channel, we've got over 170 videos currently for the DIYers, the do-it-yourselfers out there, showing everything from the ground up build of our custom 29-footer in the background to project boats, gel coat repair, just tables full of materials and material breakdown. So anything we talk about today, you can go back in the channel and find it in detail if you want to. Now, as far as PPE goes, masks are a pretty good idea when you're working in large volume. Certainly some gloves. I like a little bit of eye protection as well, because these liquids and these materials, generally we try to avoid contact with them. That's probably one of the basics. You'll notice a lot of times I wear long sleeve shirts and pants just to keep the dust and the materials off of your skin. Now, when we talk about the resins, I mentioned the polyester. Polyester, as a quick overview, is the least expensive and it's the most common. And it's probably the most common or the most popular because it is the least expensive, not necessarily because it is the best. So a lot of times in big production shops, they'll use it. Now, there are varying degrees or qualities of polyester. It's kind of like if you, again, going back to cooking, you can buy really good like farm fresh eggs versus your not so good farm fresh eggs. So when you're buying a polyester, if you're going to go that route, I would recommend an iso or an isophthalic polyester. This is called a tooling resin. Now this comes from Fiberglass Warehouse, which Fiberglass Warehouse has been fantastic. They offer boat builder grade product, stuff that I would be happy to build a boat out of, but they offer it in consumer grade sizes, DIY volumes, and they'll ship it right to your house. They also have an amazing Fish Bump TV discount code that'll save you a ton of money. Now moving up the food chain, and this is probably my personal, well, not probably, it is my personal favorite, is going to be your vinyl ester laminating resin. This is going to waterproof really well. It's going to bond really well, and it's completely compatible with gel coat, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And if I had to recommend one resin for everybody to put in your kit, it would be the vinyl ester. Now, as we move on, we've got our epoxy resin, which is also considered very good, kind of up the food chain. Very popular with the DIYers out there. And you don't see more of it in boat production is because it's very expensive and kind of hard to work with. But let's take a little bit of our vinyl ester resin, which I love, and we're going to take some of our fabrics and we're going to go to our table and actually apply some of these for you folks. Now there's a lot of information on the table here, and I'm going to try to make this, my goal is to make this one of the most in-depth videos on this topic on YouTube. So you guys and gals, hang in there with me, and feel free to comment in our comment section even after the video is over. I'm very active with my community of folks that are watching the channel, and we want to educate people. Again, I think there's a lot of people out there that could be working with these materials that are intimidated by it. They have a little bit of what my dad would call analysis paralysis. They analyze stuff to death and they never actually jump into it. This is going to be your jump into fiberglass video for everybody. Now, if we're going the vinyl ester, one of the basics, for example, I mentioned, you've got to have an activator for it. There are specific ratios, and I like these little graduated cups where you know exactly what you're dealing with. You can see we got 2 ounces, 4 ounces, 6 ounces, or you folks on the metric system, just under 200 milliliters. Now, this is a little cheat sheet. You might want to take a screenshot of this, folks. Forgive it. This is our shop one that's just laying around all the time. This is going to tell you, say, approximately if you have 32 ounces of resin, 10 to 20 cc's or cubic centimeters. Today, we're dealing with 6, so somewhere between 4 would require 1.25 or 2.5, so on and so forth. So I'm going to kind of split the difference. Basically, we're going to go between the twos on the high end. So I'm going to go, let's say, with about 4 ounces of, or 4 cc's, rather, of MEKP. Now, one of the most popular items on our Amazon store is going to be this little squeezable. You can see I've marked off 2.5 to 5 cc's. This little squeeze container, along with everything else we use on the channel, is going to be in our Amazon store. If you need that stuff, feel free to check it out. Lots of pictures and descriptions as well, so it makes it super easy for everybody. We're going to be adding our activator to our resin. Little tongue depressors, good thing to have in your kit around the house. If you don't have them, they're cheap and easy. We'll have those. Everything we're using, we'll try to make it available for everybody for convenience. You can see our resin is going to kind of change colors when you add that activator. Now, generally, about 100 circulations or about 1 minute of mix time, just to be on the absolute safe side and have plenty of mixture there. Again, you can see that kind of going dark and changing tones. Some resin do that more than others, so don't worry if it doesn't react that way. Now, it's important to remember that your polyesters and your vinyl esters are very similar. They use the MEKP, or methyl ethyl ketone peroxide hardener. If you're using an epoxy, it has its own standalone hardeners or activators, and these are usually going to be like in a ratio of, like, say 4 to 1, for example. And that is what our epoxy resin looks like. They're typically quite clear. You'll notice the polyester is a little more pinkish in tone. So again, totally normal to have some variation there. Now, I typically like to mix it in a cup, measure in a cup, and that way you can be accurate. Think again about cooking. This is kind of one of those deals where it's a little more like baking, where baking needs more precision. So get it right, be accurate, spend a little money, get the right tools so that you can do this accurately. Now, the basic tools for applying fiberglass would be an inexpensive roller. I like to wrap mine in tape, and you can see that the tape will pull some of those loose hairs off. I tend to use a 3/8 snap, and these are the economy ones. You don't need anything super fancy. Also buy these inexpensive disposable chip brushes. They make them in all different sizes. But I do like to put my resin in a pan if we're working with anything other than the tiniest of projects, because a roller is going to save you a bunch of time. The pan works really, really good because obviously a roller works better in a pan. And another benefit, folks, is that when you spread this material out, it's going to give you a longer working life. Resin, when it cures, is an exothermic reaction. That means it gives off heat, and the more heat it has around it, the faster it cures, and it kind of builds on itself. It's like a runaway train effect. So if you can get a little more airflow over this as you're working, your resin is going to live and last a little longer. Now let's just load up that roller and get that thing ready to receive some glass. Now I'm going to let that sit there because we've got a sample piece, and I am going to be moving around quite a bit today. One of the things we like to do when we're working in the shop is get a little bit of airflow so it minimizes the fumes and the smells. We're going over one of the most popular mediums for fiberglass today. That's just some standard plywood. Now with plywood, very important to take a little sander or grinder, 36 or 24 grit, and put some teeth. That puts a little bite or tooth on that surface. It also cleans it off so that we don't have any dust or debris on there. Now, if you've got some compressed air, blow that dust off and then warm up the surface and get any moisture out of there. This is also very important. So just a little bit over the surface. Those are kind of the fundamentals of fiberglass, folks. If you can remember this, the surface needs to be clean and it needs to be dry, free of moisture. Moisture is going to be a big problem for fiberglass bonding to it. Now, another little tip or trick. Sometimes we want to fiberglass something on two sides, and if you make a little board with some screws sticking up through it, you can put your material in there. It doesn't slip and slide around, and you can actually fiberglass both sides at once. Also, we want to work with, know what our temperatures are. It's 24 degrees Celsius or 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, in my opinion, the 70s are about perfect for working with composites. Fiberglass loves kind of the same temperature as we do. 70s are really, really good. Down to like the high 50s. Other than that, you got to add a lot of catalyst or more catalyst, which remember 1 to 2% is going to be your typical catalyst ratios, with the vinyl esters using a little bit more. If it's cold, you add more catalyst. Now, I've got a dedicated video here on the channel if you want to circle back for that one, working in cold weather. So we've loaded up our roller. We've got clean, dry surface. We're going to apply a base coat of resin. Now, something really important to remember when you're working with plywood is, if you can, if you have time to do it, before you really start laminating, go ahead and resin coat your plywood and then let it cure a bit to the point where you can touch it and it doesn't come off on your finger. And I'll show you why. If you look at this sample piece, we did this earlier. Do you see the air bubbles here? But they're not on this side. The same for the woven roven. Air bubbles, but not on this side. You can see the dryness in this cloth, but not on this side. I actually primed one side of this, and the other side of the wood I did not prime. And you can see how the wood pulled the resin out of the fabric. Now today, for being able to expedite through this, I'm not going to do that. We're just going to put the resin down, but remember, put the resin down, let it cure, then come back and fiberglass it. So we're going to be working with a little bit of the CSM or chop strand mat at first. Not a ton of strength there, but very good at waterproofing or basic sealing. Say if you were building a camper shell, or if you were doing some small repair jobs and you wanted some fiberglass and some strength, the CSM would be a really good fit for that. Now again, I've got videos here on the channel going into, say, just the fabric part of things, and you can always circle back. See how easy that wets out, not a problem. These are probably the two most popular, would be the CSM and the 1708 biaxial. Now it's always important, like I said, to put some resin on the back side and on the top side. And a lot of times what we will do is get a little bit of resin on there and just let it soak for a moment. Move on down the line. You don't have to stay on that one little piece for a long time. If you got a lot of glass to do, you can move around. This is going to be your 1808. Now one little trick you can do sometimes is apply a little more resin to the back side, then flip it over, wet it on the front side, give that a minute to soak. You can see the difference at an angle, straight up and down. I prefer the 1708 because it goes over contours and shapes better. Now woven rosin is strong, but it doesn't make good initial bonds like the CSM does. And this is kind of old school material. It doesn't go around curves really good either. I don't use it much anymore, but you may see it in your boat, but it's absolutely okay to go over woven rosin with these materials if you want to. All right, there we go. We're gonna wet this out. Now, one thing that is important to remember, if you're gonna be working with woven rosin, typically you would never apply it just to the wood initially because it doesn't bond near as good as the other materials. CSM is really good at that initial contact. So typically what we would do is actually put down a layer of CSM and then we would put a layer of rosin over it. And if you want a little nicer cosmetic finish, we always did this in our family's boat shop. My dad liked to do this. You'd put another layer of CSM over your woven rosin. And that makes a very strong laminate, but it's kind of old school. It's actually a lot more work. To me, it's easier. You can cut the 1708 and it all comes in one, and it's just easy. And if you can do something that's easy and is good or better, then why wouldn't you do it? Let's save some time, get those projects wrapped up, and get out there and start having fun with some of this stuff. Now, this is the finishing cloth. Very lightweight. It's kind of delicate working with it, and it's not meant to add a lot of strength. This is really just to kind of seal or coat a surface. Even like, say for example, if you've got like a little canoe or a kayak you're doing, that would be great for that, where you want to add minimal weight, but you do want to seal the wood, but you can actually still even see through it. You can put like a polyurethane over that after it's been fiberglass, and you get this translucent effect. Now you can kind of see here just in a moment the difference in how these different materials are acting. And sometimes you have to come back periodically and roll them a little more, give them a few minutes to soak in. You can see how much faster that one initially soaked in, and then how much faster like your CSM soaks in. Works rapidly there. Now there was another little trick I was going to show you. We've got another video or a short where we use like a 5-in-1 tool to scrape some excess resin out of there. Sometimes you can actually get it to work with just a brush. You can get a little more resin out of the roller, and then you can use a brush to what my dad called dab a little more material in. Same goes. There you go. You can get a little more. Might as well utilize all of that good material. Sometimes you get down to the very end there, you need just a touch more. And don't feel like you always have to use a roller. If it's a smaller job or a little repair area, a brush can be very good. We kind of use it more in this technique. If you try to brush it back and forth, it kind of boogers up the hairs there a little bit. It doesn't look as good. If you dab it, that seems to get a better result overall. Just like so. Looking nice. Now, one of the boat builders' tricks, things we use acetone to clean our tools, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But a lot of times we'll use a little grooved roller or a hard roller to work the air bubbles. A lot of times we'll store them in some acetone. We'll shake the excess off of there, and then you can come back and work some of those air bubbles out of your laminate. I'm gonna work like half of one side, and maybe the camera will kind of pick up. It'll definitely flatten out, work some of those bubbles out of there. Same for your 1708. Back and forth, left to right. 1808. Good stuff. This doesn't really need much of it. You can see how that finishing cloth really goes down. Super transparent. Same for your CSM or matte. Now again, this video is going to be an overview of all these materials and things I've learned over the years, but you can delve back in the channel and we got specific videos on almost every one of these topics. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, when it comes to wrapping fiberglass around corners, we did a video on this piece that's been sitting around for a minute, but it's very important to round or radius the edges as well. You'll notice this, the fiberglass is able to bend over there with no problem. If you look on this side, you can see a big air bubble where we left just a sharp corner there. So remember to radius or soften all the edges. Now, one other material that is a huge time saver, and when I was going into a boat shop, we did a lot of sanding and grinding and surface prep. That's usually not the best part of the funnest part of it. My dad, I'm sure, would have loved to have seen this material. This is called peel ply. This goes down over the surface of your fiberglass, and it does an amazing job of smoothing things out, and has another benefit if you're working with epoxy, which is one of the reasons you don't see a lot of epoxy in boat shops, is a lot of epoxies produce a curing byproduct on the surface called amine blush, and it doesn't allow other materials to stick on top of it. You got to clean it and sand it. It's just a lot of prep work. If you go over your last layer of epoxy, you can put the peel ply over it, and then when you peel it off later, it takes the amine blush with it. Now, one of the other benefits is when we do it over these rough surfaces, it has a tendency to really help smooth them out. Like I'm gonna go over the 1808 a little bit. Generally, you put it on almost like a little bit like wallpaper. You kind of have to pull the wrinkles out of it, work it in. Trying to think of comparisons, folks. Now, y'all let me know what you think working with fiberglass is most like. Today, I'm talking about cooking because I think there's a lot of similarities in using ingredients. Think about like working with these materials. You got different pans for baking different size cakes, or you got different tips, like if you're applying icing, and there's certainly things you can do to make things look better and work easier and faster. So now we're going to go over the 1708 biaxial. So just to show you that these materials, a lot of them can all work together. But I do really like the 1708 biaxial, and I like the CSM. If those were a couple materials that I were gonna put together in a kit. Now I also want to show you folks, peel ply comes in different brands and different colors, but it does the same job. So don't worry about that. Now I want to show you folks what it looks like. Now this was a sample piece we made for everybody to show you. You can just peel, as the name implies, and look how nice and smooth it leaves that surface versus without the peel ply. And what's interesting is even though it's smooth, it's more receptive to following layers. So say for example, if you're at home and you're working on the weekends and you get some work done and you get to a stopping point, you can put a layer of peel ply on the last layer, and then you can come back the next week and you can peel it off, and it is receptive and ready to receive additional layers of fiberglass, or you can actually go over that with gel coat. Now, let me turn that off for audio. Oh, that's better. Let me turn that off for audio quality, everybody. And y'all please forgive me. Sometimes my voice goes out because on our charter boat, we have to talk loud and we talk a lot, and with making these videos. So sometimes my voice will get a little scratchy, and that's all that's going on there if you hear that. So yeah, so we talked about fabrics, we talked about resin selection, we talked about core. Now we did fiberglass over some plywood, which plywood's good, strong, durable stuff, but the downside to it is over time, it will rot. Now, probably most popular video we did here on the channel was fiberglassing over plywood. And my father built boats back in the 60s that are still in operation today that were fiberglassed over. They were sealed up. It's kind of like if you're gonna freeze some meat. Again, going back to cooking, you can throw a chunk of meat in a freezer bag and just freeze it, or you can vacuum seal it. You lock out the air, you lock out things that cause it to go bad sooner. That's the way fiberglass can be with wood. If it's done properly, it can last for decades and decades. But a lot of people want to save some weight. They want to go with something, say for example, this is a product called Divinycell. It is feather light, and it can actually be shaped and contoured and bent, and then fiberglassed on either side with some 1708. Now think about you folks that are new to this world. Longtime viewers of the channel know exactly what 1708 is, and I've mentioned Divinycell in the past, but you're learning new terminology now that's going to pay dividends later. But only one layer of that, and we've got, say for example, these are two identically sized pieces. This one is strong enough to support my weight, no problem. I can jump on 1 foot. I'm about 180 pounds or so. This is a piece of Divinycell with no fiberglass on it. It's quite flexible. It's unbelievable the difference of one thin layer of fiberglass can make. This is amazing. And keep in mind, you can curve this, bend this. So I'm thinking of like your small little campers that people want to build these days that you can tow behind a small automobile. Curve it, shape it, bend it, fiberglass it. They even make Divinycell in these scored. And again, you can get in touch, like say for example with this, Fiberglass Warehouse is going to carry all these materials and save some money with that Fish Bump TV discount code. Now, so we talked about Divinycell a little bit. Good stuff. It comes in different thicknesses like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4. I've built a lot of things out of it over the years and had really, really good success. There is a company called Airex that makes a different foam. That's a 3/4 inch thick. We actually got a video showing how we built the hardtop for our 29 footer there in the background out of some Airex foam, and then we laminated fiberglass on either side of it to make a crazy strong, crazy lightweight panel. And you could do the same hardtop like Dodgers for your sailboat and whatnot. But by far, here on the channel, again on our boat, my favorite by far core material is Coosa board. It behaves and acts a lot like plywood. You can cut it with a skill saw, you can drill it, you can sand it, you can shape it, you can screw it together. It'll actually hold fasteners, and it comes in different densities or weights. So these are very lightweight, like 5 or 6 pound density. Coosa board starts at about 15 pound density, which is a stronger material. Basically, that's how foam cores are. The higher the number for the density, generally the stronger they are. But Coosa board has fiberglass actually made into it between polyurethane cores. Now, you could delve into that a little bit more. And again, I've got numerous videos on the channel dealing with Coosa board. But what's interesting about Coosa is it is strong just by itself. Now, this is some 3/4, really cool option from Coosa. Now, you can actually do tongue and groove, which we've actually got a piece here that made a video of where we got tongue and groove joint, and then we put one layer of 1708 over either side. Fantastic if you're putting like floor panels in your boat, and you can just do that one joint to another. Now, another great material that we use to glue that, Fiberglass Warehouse makes a vinyl ester structural putty if you're interested in gluing or bonding stringers, floor panels, you name it. This stuff is pre-made, pre-thickened, and you basically would put it down in the joint, but you got to put some MEKP in it to make that happen. But that is really, really, really good stuff. I highly recommend y'all looking into that if you're going to make something where you got to glue it together. Same test though. This is going to be your Coosa with no fiberglass on it. Yes, there's a little deflection or flex, but that's okay. If you think about a boat or an RV, You want things to be able to flex and move and then come back into place. Our 29 footer that we use in our offshore charter business, we recently crossed 9,000 miles of offshore use in that boat with no stress cracks, no problems. And it is built in its entirety out of ISO polyester and the Cusa board with a combination of 1808 and 1708 and the CSM. Now, if you're wondering, again, forgive me too, folks, because growing up in a boat shop, all this stuff seems like second nature to me, but even simple little things like how do you cut fiberglass? Decent pair. Those are Fiskars. Picked up local big box store. I think we have them on our Amazon store as well. That works completely fine. You don't need anything exotic or crazy expensive. Now, I'm going to be moving around again quite a bit, but I'm thinking after we fiberglassed, another question I get all the time on the channel, how do you clean your components? Acetone is going to be the best bet. Now, it is highly flammable. You don't want it on your skin, but it does a really, really good job of cleaning these materials. And it's a simple matter of when you're finished mixing up your resin, my dad called that jogging it in there. Kind of just jog it back and forth, and it comes right out. When you're done with your rollers, we always call this kicking it off of there. You can kick that roller off of there. It can go back in your little container. Now, you remember earlier when we talked about exothermic reactions? Sometimes rollers that have a bunch of resin in them can get hot when they start to cure, and you never would want to throw one of these rollers with unkicked resin in your trash can. I generally toss them outside somewhere where there can be away from other combustibles, let them go through their cure cycle, and then we'll pick them up later and we will throw them away. Now, when we're doing a bunch of fiberglass work, we don't want to waste or throw away this acetone. You don't want it to evaporate. So we'll take what's left here after we've cleaned it, and I always keep a 5-gallon bucket with some acetone in it. And at the end of the day, I will just pour any excess out. And then even sometimes what I'll do is just store my tools in there. And that way, anytime I need them, I know where they are, and the acetone is going to keep them nice and clean. Now again, remember, you can, with these cores, use varying combinations. You can use vinyl ester with these core materials. You can use polyester. You can use epoxy. But you're going to get different results. Now, one foam core that we get questions about sometimes is your standard like big box store. It's not a structural foam like these are. These materials are made to work with fiberglass. This is not. And it can be fiberglassed over with an epoxy resin. The reason you do that is because your polyesters and vinyl esters are going to be reactive with it. And if you look there, you can see that has actually melted down. That was some polyester resin that melted down into it over a day's time. So just remember that. Now, I wouldn't typically recommend building anything structural out of this kind of foam material. It's kind of popular, some of the artsy craftsy stuff, but generally you're going to want to use epoxy with it. Now, I will circle back again to epoxy and gel coat. Now, this is a hot topic, folks, and we've got videos on this one as well, dedicated videos. Generally speaking, if you fiberglass over something with epoxy resin, there can be compatibility issues when it comes to putting gel coat over it. It may not bond properly because gel coat is more closely related to your polyester and your vinyl ester resins. They're kind of like a similar family, if you will, whereas epoxy is kind of a different animal. Now, there are some people that say that if you let your fiberglass with epoxy material dry for a certain amount of time and then sand it very aggressively, that yes, you can get gel coat to stick. But most manufacturers, including Fiberglass Warehouse, generally do not recommend trying to put gel coat over anything that's been fiberglassed with epoxy. Now, there are lots of additives that we can put in these materials too. And it would almost be like seasonings, for example. Think again about like with cooking. Do you like a little more of a Cajun style, or are you into Italian food? You know, what do you like? There's going to be spices. So additives that might thin or thicken or even help things cure better. We're going to talk about that next. Gel coat. This is without wax. Gel coat is interesting in that you can either get it with wax or without wax. it needs a little bit of wax on the surface to completely cure or fully harden. What we call tack-free is another phrase the DIYer might have never heard. What, something to tack off or tack-free. But basically, there is a paraffin wax dissolved in a solution, a styrene solution. Some people call it surface seal. Sometimes it's called modifier C wax solution. And basically, you put it in the last coat of your gel coat, and it rises to the surface, creates an air barrier, and allows this material to fully cure. If you're wanting to do multiple coats of gel coat, I would go without wax, and then on the last coat, you're going to add some wax to it. Now, there are other products out there called PVA, and you can actually even use the peel ply on it. Important to remember, though, on this, as far as adding it, generally up to about 5% with your gel coat without wax if you want it to be tack free, or as a good rule of thumb, if you've got a little container and say you've got some, if that were gel coat, or why don't we just use the actual gel coat, you would pour enough in there to basically cover the surface. Now, it is important to remember to agitate or mix all of these materials. That's kind of a fundamental, again, of working with these things, is usually before we use any of the resins or gel coats, stir them or mix them. And we're going to show you, as a general rule, enough modifier C to cover the surface. If you can see that, that's plenty. And obviously, as it gets a little more, you could add a little bit more than just enough to cover the surface. But keep in mind, like 3 to 5% on this stuff, and that is going to allow your gel coat to cure tack-free. Now, very important to remember to mix it in thoroughly. Whoop, there we go. Got my blue shirt. Got on my blue shirt. That hardly ever happens. All right. Not a problem there, though, folks. Not a problem. Take a little bit. Take a shop towel. This might be a good learning moment there. Super quick. Now, trash can always handy. Another blue shop towel under the shirt. I'm gonna back it just a little bit. I'm gonna take just a little bit of acetone right there. All right, pretty decent. That'll work. I know a lot of people been watching the channel are like, man, how do you stay so clean? But even guys that are good at staying clean, occasionally you're going to get a little material on you. Now, I may get some comments on this one. People may say, hey man, what in the world, putting acetone? But it evaporates crazy fast. And that's just part of doing this kind of work, folks. Sometimes you're going to get little splashes. That's exactly why you wear eye protection and some gloves, because this stuff is going to get on you on occasion. Now, that will flash off really quick and not really a problem. Now, if this were MEKP and it got on your skin, I would probably take this shirt off, get it cleaned, get another shirt. You do not want to leave this stuff in contact with you. All right, so we're moving on over to some of our additives. So if you want to thin your materials, if you want to make something that's a little bit easier to spray with your gel coats, something like styrene monomer, that would be like adding a little more water or a little more liquid to batter, for example. And you can thin that out a little bit if you want to spray some of the gel coat, versus traditionally when here in the shop we do a lot of rolling with a little 3/8 snap or with the brush. Another fantastic additive from Orca Composites is the air dry coatings. It's a clear additive. Now this is up to 50%, 50-50. You can add this to gel coat. Amazing for spraying it and or for making patches and repairs. And it also allows your gel coat to dry tack free. So it's really good stuff. And again, I got videos dedicated to that. Now, if you want to thicken your resin, you can see how much thicker that is. We've already added a little bit of a couple additives that I think you should have in your kit if you're interested in doing this and you need to familiar yourself with the vernacular. That's a fumed silica. Now that is from Fiberglass, and you got a part number right there if you need to order some of that. That is very good at thickening both resins and thickening gel coats. You just want to be careful when you're mixing this stuff to absolutely have a respirator on and maybe a vacuum pulling some of the dust particles. And we've got another material if you want to make something very strong for filling more of a structural damage. We got a 1/4 inch milled fibers. Now this is what our milled fibers would look like. And a lot of times when we're adding it to our resin, a little spoon, pick up how much you want. It's no specific amount. A lot of times just to get started, I will kind of mix in equal volumes, not in equal weight. So if you've kind of got, if you measured out like say 1 ounce of resin, start with about 1 ounce by volume. And there's a little bit of the fumed silica. Colloidal silica is another name you hear a lot. Now again, folks, I grew up in a boat shop. My father was a boat builder. We've been around this stuff forever, so I have a certain amount of comfort with it. Like folks, maybe for example, again in a kitchen working a hot surface there, they're more comfortable with things, and that's the way we feel in here. But starting in small amounts that you feel comfortable with, and then starting with materials that are going to give you a good baseline. So I want to circle back here and talk a little bit about my picks if I were going to work with some materials or get some in my kit, what I would call it. So say for example, if you're an RVer or if you're a boater or someone who does extended travel vacations or even like someone off the grid, probably a good idea to have some knowledge of this stuff. Would have to say that the vinyl ester from Fiberglass Warehouse is my favorite all around. It's got the vast majority of the strength of the pros that the epoxy has without a lot of the negatives. It's mid-level in the cost spectrum, so like cheapest, midway, most expensive. And I just really, really like it, and specifically this particular one. And I've used a bunch of different ones, and they're not all the same. So if you want Fiberglass Warehouse's vinyl ester strength, but you don't want to have to deal with the thickening agents that we were just working with, you can absolutely go straight to their structural putty, and that will glue, bond, adhere if you're doing stringers, floor, transom in your boat, or small structural repairs. If you want to order some of the milled fibers and some of the colloidal silica, that gives you some variety. You can also mix that with gel coat and make different thickened paste. So you have some options there. When it comes to core materials, if you grew up working with plywood and you want something that has similar strength and you can work it with similar tools, but you want a rot proof and a slightly lighter weight version, Coosa board would be the way to go. Now Coosa, there's some online sources for that. You probably would want to check out Boat Outfitters, would be really nice people to work with, and I've got videos showing some of the other hardware they offer. And you might want to mention that you saw their brand or company on Fish Bump TV as well. Now when it comes to your fabric selection, the CSM is really, really good, universal for your smaller repairs, and it can be used in conjunction with the woven roven, but I really lean toward the 1708, which was the one under there, or that one with the 45 degree width. If I had to pick one, I would probably lean toward the 1708. Not a bad idea to have a little infrared temperature gun so you can see exactly what temps you're working with. 72 is going to be amazing. Fiberglass loves the 70s, just like I do. So that's where we are right now. A little hard roller for working the bubbles out. Some inexpensive 9-inch rollers. You don't need fancy stuff, folks. You can get started in fiberglass for, I would say probably a couple $100. You can set up a decent little kit. Some cheap brushes to work with. And again, if you're working remotely or want to put this together, you could have a little kit. It can all go in a box. Not a bad idea to have some acetone for cleaning. We buy it in larger volumes. Highly flammable though, folks. Remember, acetone is flammable in the order of like gasoline. So it will go boom if it's exposed to a spark or a flame. So you absolutely want to do that. Remember, you can spend a little money and get like some chloroprene, like some chemical resistant gloves, or if all you have access to is latex, a lot of times what we will do is you can actually double glove. So sometimes we will do that with latex gloves. I don't typically do it with the chloroprene, but you don't have to. And what's cool about double gloving, a lot of times if you get some fibers or something on your hand and you're having trouble continuing to work, you can shed one off and you've got another clean glove right underneath it. Now, again, folks, very active with the community. I feel like sharing this knowledge that my father passed on to me is something that we can do that just is super helpful. It seemed like the response is very, very positive and we're happy to share. But you folks in return, if you're enjoying the content we're doing, feel free to comment. Let us know what you think. Join our community there with our Facebook group page at Fish Bump TV. Hit that subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend. And even our longtime viewers and supporters, sometimes folks comment and they're like, man, I've been watching you for months and I haven't subscribed to the channel. It's totally free to do so. For some reason I say something in the future you don't like, you can unsubscribe. It literally takes 2 seconds, and that does help us to get this in front of more people, and the YouTube algorithm will kind of pick us up and we can grow the channel, because I think there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that would love to learn about the wonderful world of using composites to make and create, just like with cooking, infinite variables and things you can do with it. So I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. Also our Patreons that support the channel and folks that are working with us directly through Patreon on their own personal boat restoration or projects. So thanks again, everyone. Captain Joe here, Island Marine Charters, Fish Bump TV. My son Logan working hard behind the scenes as my amazing cameraman. And we'll catch you folks in the next episode.